Hi, my name's Parrisa, and I'm going to be responding to the claim, raising minimum wage has a positive impact on California. My opponent's secondary claims to support this argument are raising minimum wage positively affects employment, raising minimum wage positively affects employees, and raising minimum wage positively affects California's economy. For his first statement, raising minimum wage positively affects employment, he pulls evidence from multiple sources, but some of the evidence starts to contradict itself. One of the quotes states, with an increase in minimum wage, employment will grow by 1.4% from 2016 to 2023, based on past records. Yet later in the same set of evidence, it says, with a slight increase in minimum wage, employment will only increase by 0.1%. This claim doesn't match up because the numbers to prove the point are not. The numbers to prove the point of not raising minimum wage would increase employment quicker than raising it. Another issue was the evidence discussing jobs turnover rates. The quote used from the United States Department of Labor explains that January 2016, the unemployment rate was 5.7%, and in July 2018, it dropped to 1.5%. The problem isn't the evidence itself, but rather the details missing from it. There's nothing proving if the minimum wage is increased or by how much. There was also no reasoning provided to explain why the speaker is on that side of the argument. The advocate claimed a higher wage would theoretically create more jobs, but in fact it would eliminate jobs. Ordering businesses to pay entry-level workers more will make them hire fewer of them, and consider replacing workers with more robots or computers. If the rate at which the employer has to pay the employee raises, but the income of the business does not increase, there will be not enough money to create higher minimum wages. In his next secondary claim explaining the benefits employees receive from raising minimum wage, he states that the IRLE, which is Berkeley University of California's Institute for Research and Labor, shows increasing minimum wage to $15 an hour would increase earnings from 5.26 million workers, or 38% of California's workforce. But as far as we know, this is just evidence on paper. There's no proof showing how they got these numbers or how research was conducted. He also states a little later in the claim that increased minimum wages would benefit children's educational performances in cognitive and behavioral outcomes. This evidence sidetracks a little bit because it doesn't say that the kids in school are working employees. The data used was not specific to the positive effects minimum wage would have on the actual employees in California. Discussing the advocate's statement about these children is actually unlikely. Kids would work harder after the minimum wage is increased because levels of motivation would decrease. Ira Stroll, the editor for the online site Reasons and author of the novel JFK Conservative, states, "It would reduce the incentive for low-wage workers to get an education and move up to higher-paying jobs. Making the entry-level jobs higher-paying increases the risk that workers will get stuck in them for longer instead of moving up onto something more rewarding." So going back to the discussion of impact raised wage has on employees themselves, if the wage is increased, it provides the employers with a dilemma that will in turn affect the employee. Wage hikes frequently force employers to cut jobs and scale back hours for the employee to maintain profits, so they can stay in business, as I explained earlier. According to New Jersey Representative Jim Saxton, raising the wage hurts those it intends to help. Although it might not be entirely false that raising the wage would help some employees in California, without consideration, the advocate falsely put inexperienced, poor, and unskilled workers into the generalization of successful employees. Getting into the third secondary claim that raising minimum wage would benefit California's economy, in the beginning of this topic, there's a lot of evidence supporting that raising minimum wage would be disastrous to California's economy, especially in the quote, "The Chicago Federal Reserve has calculated that every $1 increase in minimum wage raises consumer spending by about $2,800 a year for every minimum wage household." This seems to contradict the main claim because the more that the people make, the more that they spend, so there's no increase in their income. So overall, raising the wage will not positively affect the economy, especially not for an extensive amount of time. According to Marcus Hawkins, a senior engineer in the Division of Regional Engineer markets, the Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, the minimum wage is seemingly raised every few years, and it's never enough in the long run. After all, a minimum wage at $10 is still a minimum wage. And if higher labor costs cause the price of everything to go up, the price of the dollar is merely weakened and no progress has been made. The American economy needs true economic growth that enables people to succeed, not a temporary feel-good fix. So even if we raise the wage to $15 in California, which is what the advocate suggested, the price of the dollar goes down, and then the price of goods and services is going to increase. So based on the research conducted by labor economist James Shirk, this increase will make California the leader in having the highest minimum wage in the world. As I stated before, the raise in wage will make it harder for people to get jobs, so it will decrease their spending, so there won't be enough money put into California's economy to keep it running smoothly. So in conclusion, it will make the economy more reliant on fewer individuals rather than all the residents as a whole.
All right, well, structurally, everything's clear and easy to follow. On the first point, you suggest that there's a contradiction in the evidence because the percentage of people who are going to be affected is different under two different conditions. I'm not sure in the long run how much that undermines the argument. It may be that those are conditional arguments under different conditions, and so maybe that's what would account for it. Even if it's inconsistent, what is the impact of that inconsistency? Does that mean that we shouldn't trust the conclusion that the advocate's presenting, or does it mean that we can't predict what the results are going to be? I'm not sure. The information on turnover and then the information about what the unemployment rate is dropped in here, and how it's related to the minimum wage is not very clearly explained either by the advocate or by you in this particular situation. Your argument is that there's no information that links it to the minimum wage. I'm going, okay. I assume that the advocate's argument was simply that it occurred after the minimum wage went up. So what would be required to demonstrate a relationship there, that's not explained. The notion that businesses might, in essence, decline hiring people or move to automation is mostly asserted. I think there's probably good reason to believe that that's true, but you ought to find some documentation to support that point. On the supposed benefits to the employees, you suggest that there aren't really going to be long-term benefits. Primarily, well, first you kind of challenge the evidence that's being presented here by saying that they don't explain where their information came from or how it's arrived at. That's a press. I don't know that it gets you very much without any countervailing evidence to suggest that there would be a negative impact. I'm not sure why I would distrust these numbers. I think it would be reasonable in a debate to be able to offer some backup on that, but that by itself would not be sufficient to cause me to disbelieve the information there. The better arguments, I think, are the ones that suggest that there is going to be a negative consequence because it reduces the amount of money that people are going to be able to, it's not going to reduce the amount of money that they're going to have. Some people it's going to reduce the amount of money because they're going to be out of jobs and they scale back. And the other argument is the third point, which basically says inflation is going to eat up whatever increase in value they have. I don't know if there's an equal trade-off. I don't know that there's any way that it gets quantified here. That's a little bit problematic. All right. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.